Welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. My name is Phil Crimmins. I'm one of the two co-founders of Mandarin Blueprint. And what is Mandarin Blueprint anyway? One of the things that's kind of interesting about our project here at Mandarin Blueprint is that sometimes people struggle to understand what the heck we are. They're like, hey, so where can I go have classes? And we're like, well, we're not a brick and mortar school, nor do we have live classes. What we are is an online curriculum that you can follow at your own pace. Now, online courses are so full of advantages, but they have this disadvantage called nobody's really holding you accountable. So you can sign up for an online course, you can even pay for an online course, and then never open the web page and never go look at it because you're not going to get a degree for it. So there's not that sort of incentive on the other side of it. And you're not necessarily going to have somebody knocking at your door saying, hey, why haven't you shown up to class? Because it's not a class, it's an online course. So we want people to understand that what we can do for you, the carrot that's at the other side of this online course, is get Chinese into your brain faster than any other method that's out there currently. And so the reason we're so confident about that is because Chinese requires foundation building like no other language does. But if you build that foundation solidly, it's incredibly easy. And that might be a surprise to some people because Chinese is always framed as the most difficult language in the world. But it's not exactly the best way to think about it. Here's how you should think of Chinese. Chinese requires learning an entirely different writing system, that will make you better at thinking, that will make you completely reframe your perceptions of the world, that can actually change how you perceive your day-to-day life. It's that different from our writing system. So naturally, that takes a little bit of time to figure out. But because Chinese runs on characters, not running on an alphabet, the way that you build the language is much more like putting Legos together. The grammar is so simple because you're just like putting little puzzle pieces together and going, okay, well, this one means table and this one means book. So if we put book table next to each other, that means desk, the book table, 书桌. And like that type of logical consistency across the language. And I should say it's like, it's not 100% consistent because it's made by humans and humans aren't consistent, but it's way more consistent than English. So if you can learn the characters properly, oh my gosh, is it easy. And it makes you better at thinking and it gives you access to 1 billion people. So there's your carrot. There's your show up every day to learn how to speak Chinese through Mandarin Blueprint, because everything else that's out there is either very good but focused towards an intermediate learner or, advanced learners. And the reason why they do that is because if you can focus towards intermediate learners or advanced learners, then you can sort of take as an assumption that you advanced learners somehow already figured out loads of characters. So now that I know that you already have that, here's some great techniques. And we're so happy those people are out there. They've helped us learn a lot of Chinese ourselves. But what's somewhat lacking is good foundational material that teaches characters properly so that you can not only learn them quickly, but remember them forever. Or if you do forget them, quickly remember them again because you have the right techniques to learn them. And you also need to quickly use them in context. So we have this great system for remembering Chinese characters called the Hanzi movie method. And it breaks down the character into its character components, its pinyin initial, its pinyin final, its tone. And we have a whole system of mnemonics that works so well for people. And we're going to get a lot into that later in the show. But it allows you to quickly learn everything you need to know about a Chinese character, sometimes as fast as 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. These are the actual numbers we get from our case studies. People can learn a character like that. But then, once you have a character, you're not done with it. You need to then see it in the context of a word, and then you need to see it in the context of a sentence, and then you need to see it in the context of a paragraph and a story. You need to build it out. And when you do that, you'll just see what an incredibly logically consistent and fascinating language Mandarin is. So when it comes to showing up for an online course, what you need is that carrot at the other end. And then, when it comes to, everybody said this, you always need a carrot and a stick, right? Well, I'm not a big fan of negative motivations, but they do work sometimes. And really what it just comes down to is that why not make Chinese the thing that can get you to become good at habits? Because there's like a meta game that you can win. So one of the things that Chinese really helped me with was the idea of no 0 days. With Chinese, I decided, okay, no more 0 days of working towards a goal that I'm trying to achieve. some things shouldn't have should have some rest days if you're talking about maybe physical activity. But when it comes to mental activity, making sure that there are no days where I make zero progress was huge towards building habits, not just for Chinese, but everything intellectual that I've done since. Any intellectual pursuit that I've done since that time has gotten me into that no 0 days mentality. And Chinese could be that. And if you can't pull that off, I guess the stick is just feeling bad about yourself. Like, I can't manage to do at least 1 minute a day of something every day. There's an app I think called No 0 Days that helps exactly with this. And there's also Habitica. There's a great app for this type of stuff. And so if you can manage to just show up at courses.mandarinblueprint.com every day and open it and watch a video or do an Anki card, then you're facilitating the habit enough that you can figure out, okay, this is quite the language. It's quite a system to learn it. And this will get me to access to 1 billion people, a language that makes me completely reframe how I perceive the world. It's that much different than English. And also recognize that there's a whole different way to look at almost any concept if you start from a different foundation. And yes, that foundation building period is longer than other languages, but we at Mandarin Blueprint, through the Hanzi movie method and through integrating the characters you learn with words, sentences, paragraphs, and stories, we've made that foundation building period way more fun. It's so much more fun than it used to be. And so by doing that, you can now get to Mandarin. It's actually an achievable goal as opposed to this huge Herculean hardest language in the world thing. Okay, so that was a bit of an opening bit about what Mandarin Blueprint is about. What's the Mandarin Blueprint podcast about? Well, and I recognize we have many loyal listeners who are like, yeah, I know what it's about. But there's always new listeners, and we can tell that from our podcast analytics. So what is the Mandarin Blueprint podcast about? Well, naturally, if we have a mnemonic system for memorizing the character components and the pinyin initial and the pinyin final and the tone and how do you remember the character quickly, and then you have all these students on the course, you're going to get suggestions from people. They're going to say, hey, how about this component be represented by a giant obelisk or the Washington Monument, or perhaps that giant tower, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, that represents a vertical line. Well, if we get suggestions during the week, we want to share them with everybody else, and we want to give a response to the people who've participated in the course or are engaging with the course. But we also get questions that come in. We get full mnemonic scenes suggested. And so what we want to do is have a weekly podcast where we interact with all the people who are leaving these comments on the course or sending them an email to podcast@mandarinblueprint.com. So if you have any questions about your Mandarin learning on any level, whether it's characters, pronunciation, words, if it's grammar, feel free to send it over and we'll address it on the podcast. Just send an email to podcast@mandarinblueprint.com. You will enter our system, and once we've recorded a podcast, edited it, put it up on YouTube with the timestamped links, we'll send you the timestamped link where we addressed your question. So let's get into some of the questions. But before we do that, I do have a couple of announcements. First one, we have been talking for a few weeks about these updates to the course that we've been wanting to do, just little clerical error fixing and the top-down words that we're missing, which just means words that you haven't learned yet. If we gave you a sentence and there was one word that you haven't learned, we made some mistakes in the early part of it where we would forget to list one. And so we fixed those. All the Anki decks are updated, so you can re-download those and it will automatically fix the mistakes that were in your Anki deck. The course platform is updated, so you can count on there being far, far fewer mistakes. And while I hesitate to say that there are 0 mistakes, and feel free to tell us if you find a typo or anything like that in the comments, it is much more presentable now, much better when it comes to those grammar materials. And again, the reason why there were some clerical mistakes was just rushing. We were rushing to get it out by January 2019, which is when we originally released the course. And there weren't as many problems with the first several levels. So the levels 1 through 12 are still the same, but from levels 13 through 36, they're just these little, there's 7,000 sentences. So within those 7,000 sentences, little errors and whatever, The translations have been added to levels 26 through 36. So when you get your new Anki decks, there will be new translations there, and they're also on the course platform. And we've made a new update to phase 3 of the course, which is levels 13 through 20. So originally, the conceit of the course was whenever you learn a new word, whether it be a 1-character word or a 2-character word, we will have a set of sentences using that word below. What are those sentences made up of? They're made up of the characters and words that you've already learned so that they're comprehensible, because the key to language acquisition is getting as much comprehensible input as possible. And then when you've built up enough of that, you naturally want to output because you have enough that you've understood and now you're ready to express yourself. That is the actual language acquisition process. You cannot force output. It has to come naturally from good, comprehensible input. And so this theory of language acquisition is what we use to apply across all of our grammar acquisition materials by saying, okay, here's a new word, 内心, my innermost heart's feelings, and then here's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 sentences with the word 内心 in it. And the original conceit was put all of these sentences into your review queue. All of these sentences have a flashcard. They're in order in our flashcard decks. So do all of them. But what we were finding out from people, especially the case study we did with a guy named Terry Ching, he said, the sentences can get to be a lot. And then we saw another few people, Sammy, who's doing the HSK3 challenge right now. She also was saying, wow, this is a lot of sentences. And so we went, okay, why don't we give a required sentence and all the other sentences are optional? Now, this is per usage of the word. So, for example, some words like, the word 生活 can be a noun, meaning my life, or it can be a verb, to live. Right? So that's clearly a different usage, a verb and a noun. We should definitely get at least one sentence per usage. But what we've done is we said, okay, we have your required sentence and all other sentences are optional. And it's very clearly labeled in the course platform and also in your Anki cards. Your Anki cards are marked and they have a red flag on the ones that are the required sentence. So if you want to not have too many sentences, just do the required sentences. And then for the optional sentences, just unsuspend the cards, that is to say, have them enter your review queue if you like them. Do all the required ones for sure, and then the optional ones, just read through them on the course platform and go, oh, that sentence is interesting, and just unsuspend that one. Don't need to analyze it too much. Just ask yourself, do I like it? Now, why? Why would you do it that way? Well, there's a big game that you're playing, and there's a little game that you're playing. So the little game, which is always a winnable game, is something like, learn all the sentences on this page and then review all the flashcards you have for today, right? And that's a fine game, and you can win that game. You can go to a new lesson, see all the sentences, and learn all the sentences on there, unsuspend the flashcards, and put them into your review queue. Cool. There's a bigger game, though, that you're playing, which is become fluent and literate in Mandarin. And never should the big game be sacrificed for the little game. So if playing the little game to its extreme, that is to say, learning all the sentences no matter what, if doing that causes you to give up or feel like it's too much or have too much anxiety in your day-to-day study, then you've lost the big game, which is the game you do not want to lose, which means that go ahead and make the little game simpler if it means you keep doing it every day. Because if you keep doing it every day, you will get there. There's no doubt about it. Of course you will. So the key here with understanding that is just to get that no matter what you're doing day to day, it's the daily habit that is actually what you must protect, what you must fight for in a way. So that's our suggestion for phase 3. Just do the required sentences. One more note on that. In level 13, which is the first level of phase 3, we still have you do all the sentences. And the reason for that is you need to get a barometer of how it feels to do all the sentences. So we have one level, the first one, where we say, okay, do every sentence. Do every single sentence here. And then after level 13, some of you will feel like, geez, that was a lot of sentences. In which case, starting at level 14, do just the required sentences. However, some of you are going to finish level 13. You're going to go, that was fine. No problem. I'll just do all these sentences. Because at the end of the day, yeah, more sentences is better than fewer. More comprehensible input is better than less. So you might as well do all of them if you can handle the amount of workload. But if you can't, or you don't want to, again, win the big game. Don't win the little game at the expense of the big game. So that's one announcement we had. Next announcement, the character course expansion. I have been working diligently on the weekends on this, and I've made it through, say, the first about 150 characters or so in terms of setting the order. We've already done loads of analysis about which characters we're going to do, but it's now about presenting them in the right order and presenting them in a way that is interesting and also gets you the most bang for your buck. So you're learning the best characters and the most amount of that unlock the most amount of words that you can use in day-to-day life. And so we've decided, because I'm now starting to see, when you do something really big, like determine how to teach 1,000 characters, as you do it, it starts to clarify what it's going to be as you're going through the process. And I'm starting to see, okay, I think I can get this mostly completed, at least the preliminary step of it, if I had like a week, 6 full work days, like long work days, I could probably knock out what's this preliminary phase where we come up with a rough draft of an order, and then Luke will go through it and he'll give his opinions, and then we'll go from there. But I think that's about the amount of time I would need. And so Luke and I have agreed that I will spend at least 6 full work days just focusing on this, starting pretty soon, probably starting either later this week or next week. And so that should mean some good news on that front coming relatively soon. And again, just to temper expectations, I'm not saying that after those 6 days we'll be ready to release anything. It's basically a preliminary phase that we'll finish. But once we have a rough draft of an order, it's mostly a matter of tweaking and coming up with sort of areas where Luke and I can debate and argue whether or not we want to put a set of characters here or there, and that's where some of the best stuff happens. That's where we came to a lot of great ideas, and that's one of my favorite things to do with Luke. Luke and I have a very complementary sort of ways of thinking about this that creates lots of thought babies, and then you end up with it's like what I say about why 2 heads are better than 1, and actually a lot better than 1, is that suppose I have an idea, and I also have an idea that would piggyback off of 2 of Luke's ideas, but Luke's 2 ideas are only going to get triggered by my first idea, and I will never get to say there's one idea and there's a piggyback and then another thought that he has on that one. So there's 3 thoughts, and the only way I'm going to have the 4th thought is if I hear the second and third thought, and then we end up just going back and forth and creating this whole thing. And so that's pretty exciting from the perspective of building a new character learning course. So with that in mind, character expansion is making some progress. We're making some decent progress with the updates. We've made those updates. They're ready to go. So, and we're always trying to get more people on the course. It's tough. It's trying to convince people, what the heck is this thing? What is it? Is it a live class? Is it what is it? It's an online course. So, we're working on that. Online marketing is a big challenge, but we're so grateful to all of you who are on the course who make it possible for us to still be able to do this day to day. All right. Now, with that in mind, let's get into today's user question. Now, first, I'm going to start off with an email that is totally just like sort of a marketing search engine optimization type of email we received. But interestingly enough, though, if I actually talk about it, it will help get the word out about a bunch of Mandarin learning podcasts. I got an email from a guy named Anuj Agarwal. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he says, I'm the founder of FeedSpot. I would like to personally congratulate you as your website, Mandarin Blueprint, has been selected by our panelists as one of the top 15 Mandarin Chinese learning podcasts on the web. And this is what I'm saying about how it seems like kind of a marketing email, because are there even 15 Mandarin Chinese learning podcasts? There's probably around that many that are consistently updating. Maybe there's more, but we're in the top 15 according to FeedSpot. So hooray. And he puts a link here because I think how SEO works is that if you link if your blog or whatever gets linked in many other places on the web, then Google recognizes that and you get a higher search ranking. So he's basically saying like, hey, will you post this link to our blog, the blog.feedspot.com/Mandarin Chinese Learning Podcasts. And I've posted that in the show notes because that will get more traffic to his blog. But it is a good post. It has our podcast, obviously, and it has several other Chinese learning podcasts. So if you're interested in more Chinese learning podcasts, go check out that link below. And this way, we'll get some more traffic to Anuja's site, and why not? He's doing a good thing, and we'll also get you some more Mandarin learning podcast opportunities. So that's something that is, always good. And it's funny. He has such a marketing email. I personally give you a high five and want to thank you for your contribution to this world. Well, thanks very much, Anuj, and we've put the link in the show notes. So let's get into some prop suggestions. So props are the object representations of a Chinese character component in our mnemonic visualization system called the Hanzi movie method. So when you're learning a new character, it has character components, and trying to remember how they're written on the page, our brains are not very evolved to do that, but we are quite evolved to remember objects. So if I've got my Starbucks coffee, I've got several associations with this, but I've also got the ability to imagine it in my mind. Like I don't need to sort of put any extra effort into imagining a Starbucks cup. And I could have this Starbucks cup represent a Chinese character component. So could I have with any other number of objects. So we, meaning Luke and I, when we originally made the course, what we did was think to ourselves, what could be some good object representations for these various character components? And what we discovered was that obviously we don't know all the possible associations you could have. So people give their suggestions based on either the meaning of the character component or how it looks. So first we have Sandy on pick a prop for jiu, which means 9. It's the number 9, and it's a character component in many characters. So she says, Gumiho, or Gumiho, which is a 9-tailed fox from Korean legends. So 9-tailed fox represents the component for 9. Perfect, great. Sandy again on pick a prop for Jing, which means like sort of scenery, and she picked a rainbow. Well, sure, absolutely. A rainbow is one of the best things to see when you're looking at scenery. I remember one time I was in Dalat, Vietnam, and which is a beautiful little hamlet of a small town, small city, big town, small city, and there was this rainbow that was just going across the entire town after it just rained. It was absolutely breathtaking, and so yeah, that's perfect. Chad on pick a prop for duo, which means many or much. He said, since I went with a single bat for C. Okay, so this is the character component here, if you can, or the character here, if you can imagine it. It's basically two of, well, you'll see it in the show notes, but it's a doubled up version of another prop. And so he said, since I went with a single bat for C, which he's referring to the flying bats because C means evening, and bats fly in the evening, I decided to just do a colony of bats for this prop. And of course, a colony of bats is many bats, and this character means many, so that's fine. Pick a prop for die. Kiefer Sutherland from the movie The Lost Boys, because die means like kind of like bad or in some cases vampiric, and he was a vampire in that movie The Lost Boys. Chad RESSLER on pick a prop for Shao. Matt Damon from the movie Good Will Hunting when he was working as a janitor at the university, because Shao, this is one based on the appearance, Shao means few as opposed to many, but it also kind of looks like a guy sweeping. Like if you can imagine that the first 3 strokes are a body and 2 arms and the bottom stroke is sweeping the floor, you could do that. And I guess his association with Matt Damon being the janitor from Good Will Hunting, at the beginning anyway, is strong. And that is kind of a cool thing about that movie, how he, is this genius, but he's working as a janitor. So absolutely. All right, next we have From William Edmeades on Pick a Prop for Ling, we have SpongeBob because he always says order up, right? Sure. And Ling means like an order, and it's usually like I order you to do something, but still order up. It's like kind of, and I mean, I guess that's what you're doing when you make an order. I never really thought about that. How like when you're at McDonald's or something and you make an order, you're essentially, I'm ordering you to do these things. I never thought of it like that. Just because order seems so impolite. Yeah, I'm giving you an order, but I get it. All right, so let's see here. Sandy on the same prop, she says waiter because he takes orders. I should really read ahead on these sometimes. That's exactly what I was getting at. Cool. William Edmeades on Pick a Prop for Zhu, which is the character that means foot. A pair of giant pink running shoes. Absolutely. Totally. Michael on Pick a Prop for Dui, which looks kind of like a devil type character, but it also means exchange. Also consider that in Goethe's, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's, but it's that writer with the last name spelled Goeth. It looks like Goeth's, but then I think it's pronounced like Goethe. I don't know. But Faust makes a deal with the devil to exchange his soul after his death for unlimited knowledge during his life on Earth. Okay. I see that's an interesting moment from the drama of Faust, but I don't know how that could turn into a prop necessarily. Although, you might be able to come up with the character of Faust if you had a clear image in your mind of that. But that's also just an interesting piece of knowledge to share. So for sure. Ewan Grant on Pick a Prop for Chu. Go the board game, because Chu means to go. So go the board game. Or starters blocks. On your marks, get set, go. Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Simple associations. These aren't hard. Pick a prop for Chong. Going to go with Bugs Bunny because Chong means insect or bug. Like if you just say chongzi, that's just a bug. Like kunchong is the word for insect. But if you're just going to say, it's a bug, chongzi. So let's see here. And Bugs Bunny, of course, simple. And then he says also anyone from the Bugs Life movie would work as well. Absolutely. Next, Ija Amrahi on Pick a Prop for Yao. And so this character means to die young. And so we suggested, to pick somebody who has sadly, died too young for their age. We thought of Kurt Cobain, Philip Seymour Hoffman, but then Ija recommended Amy Winehouse. Absolutely. Died too young. 27. There's a lot of rock stars who died at 27, which is an interesting sort of phenomenon. William Edmeades on Pick a Prop. So this is the main prop in the character for Little Brother, D. And we suggested it being an archer because it's the prop of the bow, gong, and then one horizontal line in it. So it's like there's a bow with an arrow in it, right? And so he suggested he's going to go with the character Archer from the TV show Archer. So that's perfect. William Edmeades on Pick a Prop for Jui, which means we recommended a turkey, but he said he's going to choose a kiwi, a well-known short-tailed bird here in New Zealand. So perfect. So that's the actual meaning of this character. It's a very rare character, but it's a major component in many other characters, which is a short-tailed bird. So going with the kiwi, especially with the association. New Zealanders, we call New Zealanders Kiwis abroad. They call themselves that. So that's even a stronger association. Natalia on Pick a Prop for Jing, the Beijing duck. So perfect, yeah. Especially if you've had an experience like that where you've had Beijing duck. Just go for it. Like that the character Jing used as a prop. Just imagine a Beijing duck. It's perfect. It's a clear and obvious link. Connor Griffith on Pick a Prop for Mian, which is the sort of roof component. He said going with one of the French art berets because, of course, that goes on top of your head. This character, almost always goes on top. There's a couple of exceptions, but generally it goes on top of the character. So you imagine a French art beret. Okay, next we're going to go with the actors. Only 2 actor suggestions this week, but they're both in the U category. So on the very right side of the pinyin chart, you'll find that there is the sixth vowel of Chinese, which is u, u. So it's kind of unlike the u, which is just a regular u with no umlaut. The u is tight-lipped, and more of the sound comes from the front of your mouth, whereas the u is relaxed lips, and it's more from the back of your throat. U, 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 u. And so this sixth vowel only combines with 5 initials. It's either by itself, u, in which case it's spelled yu, or it's nu, lu, so N or L, or chu, chu, shu. And that's it, which means that you only have to pick 6 actor representations for the pinyin initial. And when it's only 6, that gives you the option of choosing your own category. Now, we gave 2 suggested categories, one being mythical gods and one being world leaders. But you could choose any number of categories. A lot of people like to choose exclusively characters from a specific fictional universe, so long as they don't use any of those characters for the actors to represent the oo sounds, because those are supposed to be fictional characters. But as long as you say, okay, Harry Potter characters are only oo, that's a clear enough categorical distinction that you won't confuse yourself. You just got to make sure that with the oo, you don't use any Harry Potter characters, because they're designated to be in the oo sound. Now, Aaron Amato on casting call for nu said, how about Nigel Farage? So he must be going with the world leader suggestion, and sure, he's a very iconic figure. And then Alina Dana Koroyan, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, casting call for Ju. And so she's in Chinese mythology, the Ju Shou, the dragon spirit of the West. He is a messenger of the ancient sky god. He lives in and controls the west of the world, oversees fall, brings bad luck, and is rather unpopular. Male spirit in charge of messages, also known as Ru Shou. I chose just the pinyin for the way it sounds. So sure, that's interesting. So Alina must have some Chinese mythology knowledge, and so she's really going to try to get into the Chinese language side of things too. That's one of my favorites, when people are already into Chinese culture or mythology, and then they get into something related to the language. That's awesome. It's like automatic motivation. Okay. Next, this is a good question from Christine, because she's having a little trouble with something, so we'll see if we can help her out. So she says, this is related to sets, by the way. We're now moving on to sets. So this is the representation of the pinyin finals, which is represented by a place. It's really easy to imagine yourself in many places that you've been before. All right, so she says, I'm having trouble with the sets or the places, because when I think of a really significant one, there's no kitchen, workplaces, gyms, school, hotel, post offices. I managed to envisage a set for AN with Andes and my favorite camping spot, but I had to use the tent as the bedroom and imagine my cooking area for the kitchen, and so on. It's not coming so easily with EN, and I'm getting discouraged to think that I have to come up with even 10 more. Objects are obviously easier. I guess the rooms are throwing me off a bit, and the list isn't helping to associate with the house or apartment. Help! Okay, so first of all, the tone, she's saying it doesn't have a kitchen. Why is that a problem? Because the tones exist in different rooms in the set that you choose. So you decide, I'm going to make EN my set in the my apartment in Chengdu, right? Well, if I chose to do that, I need to have first tone for EN be outside the entrance, second tone be inside the entrance or the kitchen perhaps, or the third tone could be the bedroom or the living room, and fourth tone could be the bathroom or the backyard. But here's the thing. These are just suggestions to allow for consistency. So if you choose a kitchen, that's really easy to tell where you are. And if you know that kitchen means second tone, then you're like, I'm imagining myself in the kitchen of my apartment in Chengdu. I know that it's second tone and EN. Brad Pitt's there, then I know it's BEN, bun. Or if it was third tone, button. And I'm in the living room. But that doesn't mean it has to be the kitchen. So, Christine, if you look at the sets blog post or the sets Google Doc, will make it clear that it's just about the boundaries. It's just about having clear enough boundaries so that in your mind's eye, you can imagine clearly the different locations, it's just like, okay, I'm definitely in the second tone area, not the third tone area. If there's any chance of mixing it up in your mind, then it's not a good enough boundary. But in your example, you said you were in the Andes at your favorite camping spot. Well, certainly inside the tent is a very clear boundary. If you can imagine your cooking area and there's a clear boundary around the cooking area, then sure. But if there's in any way the possibility of being confused about which part of the set that you're in, then maybe the boundaries need to be made clearer. But which boundaries you choose is entirely up to you. Now, as for the places, so for example, you said you were struggling with EN. Well, first of all, there's a few things you can just pick right off the bat. Oh, and I should also mention this. I picked my 13 sets randomly. I didn't associate them with the sound. I just picked 13 places I could think of from my life and then just randomly assigned them to one of the pinyin finals. Now, that's not as good as associating with them with the sound, because if you associate it with the sound, it's easier for you to remember. So EN, elementary school. So I'll imagine my elementary school, and it's very quick. But it's also not that hard to memorize 13 things. Like if you just memorize 13 things, it's not that hard. Not to mention we even give you the Anki flashcards, so you can memorize them at spaced intervals, which is, what makes you remember them anyway. When it's only 13, that's a total possibility. When you get to 3,000 characters, it's a possibility, but only if you can tolerate a long and arduous journey of painful writing over and over of characters, which is just lame and boring and nobody wants to do it. But if you're only talking about 13 pinyin finals, you can just kind of just pick 13 places from your life. See if those 13 places happen to have a mnemonic sound that you can associate with one of the pinyin finals. And that might take care of like 6 or 7 of them. And then the remaining ones you can just assign at random. So that would be my suggestion. If you're finding the associations to be tricky, then just write down 13 places. Write down the 13 most significant places from your life you can think of. Then see if they have any associations to the 13 final sounds. And then whatever's left, assign them randomly, write them down in your Anki cards, review them, and you'll memorize them before you know it. So that would be my recommendation, Christine. Also, another recommendation, if you're struggling with associations ever, is to maybe do a short meditation before you start and try to get your brain into that state of acceptance. Like, not the state of like, I must figure this out right now. I have to try to figure it out right in this moment. See if you can get your brain to enter that state of like, what will come into my mind next? I'm curious, like, what association will my brain naturally make here? If you're feeling stressed about it, it's harder to just let those associations come naturally. So that would be my secondary suggestion. Mateus on Set the Scene for 2 of 13. So this is for AN. I used to live in a house on Antelope Way. Easy. So AN, and he used to live on Antelope Way. So that house will be the representation of AN. Zach Morgan on Set the Scene 13 of 13. This is for ENG. I also went with my first residence in China. That's what Luke went with. My friend's apartment in Chengdu. Perfect. So really loving the Mandarin Blueprint method so far. It's a breath of fresh air after trying and struggling to learn only spoken Chinese. That is darn right. Only learning spoken Chinese is you're gonna hit a wall, and you're gonna hit it hard. You gotta learn the writing system. Next, we're going to get into our full movie scenes. So we have Xiao Tian, which I assume is the Chinese name of this particular individual. Make a movie for Si, which means to operate or an operator, that type of thing. The 3 components are the Rolling Stone's mouth, a razor blade or a dagger, and it's kind of like a pincer is one of the ways that we call it, but I think that Xiao Tian has picked a different one. Forceps, a forceps clamp. Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the forceps clamp would be the 3rd component here. And it's pronounced S. So we have Samuel L. Jackson in the front yard of Xiao Tian's childhood home, because there's no final with S. It's just the initial sound. When there's no final, we recommend your childhood home, and it's first tone, so it's outside the entrance. So Samuel L. Jackson is in the front yard of my childhood home, dressed like a surgeon. He is using a forceps clamp and a dagger to pierce the tongue of the Rolling Stone's mouth. So this is all fine. I just don't know that it's necessarily getting across the idea of operate or to operate. So, or an operation. I guess you could say I guess it's a surgical operation. That's not what this means. It means operate machinery, but that's what we will call a link on the English side. So you have the operation has a double meaning. It could be an operation, like a company is an operation, but you could also say an operation could be like a surgical operation. So he or she is making a connection to the English homonym, the English double meaning, to get across the meaning here. And that's perfectly fine, because once you see s in context of words and sentences, you're not going to think it means surgical operation anymore. But thinking of it as a surgical operation at first helps you remember how to write the character and how it's pronounced and what it means. So it's totally fine. Chad Wrestler on Make a Movie for T, which is topic. Location, childhood home in the kitchen. That's right. Actor, Kaylee Teresa. Her middle name for T is used. Sure. So, and that's fine. You can use the middle name as the connection there to T. The props are a Shakespeare skull from Hamlet and the Constitution. Right. So the left side component is sh, which means to be. And so to be or not to be, well, that's the Shakespeare skull idea there, right? And then you have the Constitution, because the right side component is paper or page. So like, what's the most important page to you? Well, it might be the Constitution. Okay. My daughter is home from her first semester of college, and we are hanging out in the kitchen of my childhood home. She now thinks she knows everything and decides she wants to debate me and says I can choose from 2 topics. On the table, she puts a skull from Shakespeare's play Hamlet, and next to it a copy of the Constitution. She tells me the topic we can debate is either Shakespeare or U.S. politics. I pick U.S. politics since I always win. Yes, I'm sure that you do, Chad. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Nothing to complain about there. Everything's in there. That's perfect. Xiao Tian on Make a Movie for Jue, which means to decide. The 3 components are ice, which he or she uses to make the entire environment like winter. The horse head and the Great Dane. And for Ju, because it's Jue, that's going to be George Washington for her, him or her, because of the U pronunciation. The setting is the dead of winter, in the kitchen of my E set during the post-apocalypse. George Washington is at the butcher block with a tough decision to make. That's what this character means, decision. His horse has just died and his Great Dane is starving. He finally decides reluctantly to prepare the horse's head for the dog to eat. Now, some of you might be like, that's rather gruesome. But remember, you can think of this as PG as you'd like. You know, if you can imagine claymation or something, claymation can have all. I remember there was a celebrity death match. Yeah, it was clay, sort of animated claymation of people fighting, and there would be all this gory stuff happening, but it's clay, so it's not really that, stomach turning. But if you aren't too turned, if your stomach isn't easily turned, make it as graphic as you like. Xiao Tian again on Make a Movie for Zhe. Jack Black is lying on my E-set roof in the middle of the night, looking through a spyglass. At the end of the spyglass, you see Jack's giant blinking eyeball. Then you see he's counting sheep with the spyglass so he can fall asleep. Now, the reason why there's all these ings that I was emphasizing is because that's what zhe means. It's like a present action. So it's like saying sleep, sleeping. 睡着, right? So like it's sort of a way of expressing that a verb is still happening. Xiao Tian will make a movie for Yang. My Y actor is in the backyard of my ANG set playing with, it's a YI actor in the backyard of my ANG set playing with giant life-sized Legos. They set the tree and sheep pieces side by side and express their joy that they are the same size as the real thing. So yang means same. She's got the two tree and sheep components, and because they're side by side and they're the same size as the real thing, everybody is expressing the joy of what a great life-size Lego situation you got there. Sure. And there's plenty of special effects you could add to that to make it clear, mostly with expressions and things like that. Okay, so next we have make a movie for ban, which means to handle or deal with. And so Bill Murray, moonlighting as property manager of my AN apartment building, is in my bathroom. So Bill Murray is the actor representing B, and the AN apartment building in the bathroom, that you got your pronunciation taken care of there. He is exhausted from all the issues he has to deal with in that position. He looks in the mirror, splashes water, because there's 2 drops of water on his face, and melodramatically tells himself, heavy lies the ground, because Xiao Tian has chosen to use Li, the main component in this character, as to be represented by a crown, because Li means power, and of course somebody who has the crown is very powerful. Nice. William EDMEADES on Make a Movie for Bay, Bear Grylls, B, in the bathroom of my EI set. So there you got your pronunciation there. Bay. With the sloth, which is the upper component, and a brain, the lower component. Bear and the sloth and brain are acting out the scene from the Be Prepared song from The Lion King. Or should I say, Bay Prepared. That's... Nice, William. Nice. Get that mnemonic, that auditory mnemonic set as well. Chad on Make a Movie for Go, which means enough. Location, Joe and Ryan's backyard. So Joe O is the final there, and the backyard means fourth tongue. Actor is Gary Oldman. So that's the G there. And then the props are a chalkboard with sentences and a colony of bats. So he mentioned the colony of bats before, so that's the right side component. And the left side component is ju, which means sentences, so a chalkboard full of sentences that somebody's written in school. I am with Gary Oldman in the backyard of my in-laws' house, who is busy writing out the script for his new movie titled Enough, where he plays one of the creators of Mandarin Blueprint, who had enough of traditional methods of learning Chinese and decided to start their own course. He only has the title written down and a few sentences describing the opening scene. As we hyperlapse through the day and dusk approaches, a large colony of bats begin flying around his chalkboard, and he says, "Well, you certainly have enough bats around here." Sure. Chad does a lot of meta scenes about the Mandarin Blueprint process. That would have been cool if there had been bats involved. A whole colony of them. That would have added some flavor to the early days of Mandarin Blueprint. Chad on Make a Movie for Bu, which means to take a step. Childhood home backyard with the Black Mask, Jet Li's character from the movie Black Mask. And so that's a fictional character representing the oo sound. The black in Black Mask represents the B, and the backyard of the childhood home is because there's nothing apart from BU. I'm in the backyard with the Black Mask. Oh, and the props are a stop sign at the top, and Matt Damon from Good Will Hunting because he's sweeping. Okay, cool. That's the bottom component. I'm in the backyard with the Black Mask and Matt Damon as they are rehearsing for the new action movie they are starring in. They are doing a scene where they have to walk step by step in unison, but Matt Damon is carrying a stop sign and he has his broom, so he's much slower. They keep having to redo the scene because Matt Damon keeps missing several steps since he is not as fast as the Black Mask. Sure, absolutely. And of course, having him in those carrying the unwieldy sort of janitor equipment and a stop sign would make sense logically within the scene. Obviously, why is it happening in the first place? Well, because Chinese and your props and your actors and sets created this scenario. But if he actually had to carry that stuff, it would be hard for him to be as fast as the Black Mask. Make a movie for gui. So this means expensive. The location is the Faith Inn, which is a former workplace. Back parking lot, and because it's fourth tone. The actor is Guan Hongfeng, which is the detective from the show Day and Night. So another fictional character here. And then so the Faith Inn being the former workplace is the representation of a faith. So a gui, right? Props are the Chinese flag and the razor blade and seashell, because we have the Chinese flag is the representation of zhong, which is the top component. We have the razor blade as the middle component and a seashell as the bottom component. Apparently Ija done a scene for this as well, and so Chad says, see Ija's scene below for some more backstory. But, I think I remember this. So Guan Hongfeng has come to America as he is on the trail of Gru from Despicable Me, who's been selling fake Chinese artifacts and claiming they are very expensive. He has heard he was now selling them out of his trunk in this parking lot. He brought a sample with him as well as a razor blade and showed me how Gru made them using the razor blade and seashell, and then he wrapped them in a Chinese flag. He also showed me a printout of the eBay bids and how expensive they sold for. Sure, you can imagine a computer with the eBay screen on it. Yeah, that'd be clear enough. I told him I didn't know where to find Gru, but that I did see some minions walking around downtown. Probably are some minions walking around downtown somewhere. Yep, that scene works. Got everything you need. Okay, finally we've got some miscellaneous questions. 6 or 7 of those. So let's get into the next one from Julian Laffey on bonus dialectical problems. So this is in the pronunciation mastery where we talk about some dialectical differences. He says, I have heard shema pronounced as sema. I assume it's for the same reasons. And he's probably referring to Southern Chinese where they will sometimes lose the H sound. So, you say 是的, you're like 是的, 是的. They kind of leave the H out. 吃饭, 吃饭. 吃饭, like it's like the H in the ch turns into like ц, ц, that happens sometimes in the South. But again, if you ask them, hey, say that in Mandarin, they would know how to. It's just a local dialect type of situation. William on the 耐心, patience, paragraph 1. So this is in phase 5 of the course, where we sort of introduce longer stories, and William says, very cute story. The kid reminds me of myself when I was little. And what he's referring to is just that the story is about a father who's growing older, and he wants his son to start planting flowers and grass to keep the family business going because he's getting older and he's growing. He's just growing old, and it's time for him to retire, and he gets sick, and he needs his son to take care of it. And naturally, the kid is being a kid, and he's like, I don't need to really learn how to do this. It's easy to plant flowers. And of course, he thinks that they'll have already grown to completion by day 2, and he's frustrated when they don't grow as quickly as he wants. And he even thinks, let me just pull them up to the level they need to be so that they'll grow faster. And of course they all die. And so it's a story about patience. And so he says, very cute story. Good job, Annie, writing that story. Okay, so Paul Tomasovic on Make a Movie for Hua. And just to be clear, he says at the end here that we made this clearer as he kept watching the videos, but nonetheless, though, I still want to address his point here. He says it starts to get a little more complicated as we start learning pronunciations that are spelled the same with the same tone. So like 2 characters that have the same pronunciation and even tone, like, 变化的化 and 说话的话. They're both pronounced hua, and they're different characters, but they have the exact same pronunciation. So they have a different character and something different if they use as a noun, verb, etc. Examples are dan for daybreak and dan for but, or hua for transform and hua for talk. They're using the same fictional character, the same set, same room in the set or backyard. They got the different props. The only difference is the props. Any ideas or suggestions on how to keep from getting these mixed up when trying to remember the differences? I thought about trying to think of one as a word and the other one not as a word, but it doesn't seem to work since sometimes They're not a word by itself. For example, dan, daybreak, is not a word by itself. So here's what I would suggest, Paul. And I mean, he said that, it makes it clear. We make it clear as we go along. But if you run into this similar problem, here's what I would recommend. So first of all, the props being distinct is important. That fact that you're not dealing with the same props means that there is a clear enough distinction. But what you need to do is put more emphasis on the props, make them clearer in your mind's eye, and then also do more special effects. So add more theme music, add more camera angles and theme lighting and, cinematography and things like this to sort of really make it feel like a different event, even though it's the same actor, same set, and same room in the set. So that's one thing that you can do right off the bat. The second thing is to remember that you're going to see these in context very soon. And once you start seeing them in context, despite the fact that they have the same pronunciation, they're not going to look alike because they have different character components. So when you're actually looking at the Chinese character in a Chinese sentences and not just imagining it in your mnemonic world, that will make it clear as well. Because remember, you're creating something with a mnemonic scene, but you're creating it so that you can then see it in real life, see the character used in the real world. So with that in mind, that's something that will allow you to acquire the characters very quickly. And so that's another thing. And yeah, generally speaking, I think that the key is just to change up your special effects if you can. And there's a whole document about special effects, a whole blog post we did about it. So all that stuff can make it seem very different despite being in the same room with the same actor. Michael has given a link that he shares here on Make a Movie for Ma. So this study of So Bad It's Good movies by Now You See It, which is a YouTube channel, helps explain why bad acting or camp acting works so well. And that's one of the things we suggest to make a scene more memorable is make your actor like terrible at acting, which kind of adds this element of humor to your scene. So the YouTube link to that video is in the description of both this YouTube video and this podcast. Kenneth Morgan on Make a Movie for let's see here. He says, I know that the same pinyin can refer to several different characters. I knew that the same pinyin can refer to several different characters. I didn't appreciate until now that the same combination of characters can have several different pronunciations. So here we have D, and D, all represented by the same two characters. Right. And so this is what's called a duoyinzi. So there's more than one pronunciation, but there's a primary pronunciation. Like this character is almost always pronounced D. But there's a couple of characters, like, for example, Mu Di. Or there's a brand name, Meidi, that is Medea. It's like they make refrigerators and stuff. They'll use an alternative pronunciation, but generally speaking, it's usually duh. So that's why when there's a multiple pronunciation character, we always teach the main pronunciation first, and you'll figure out the secondary or tertiary pronunciations as you move on and you become more advanced. Final comment, Cora Ashley on problem initial X and simple final I. She says, OMG, thank you. The tongue position makes all the difference in the world. My pronunciation has been the biggest obstacle for me in actually attempting to speak Chinese to someone other than myself in the mirror. I'm a new student, but already your course is really helping me gain confidence to actually speak to people in public. Yes, great to hear that, Cora. Our pronunciation course is pretty excellent. It's the main starting point for anybody who's an absolute beginner is to nail that Chinese pronunciation. It's 180 videos, 8 hours, 6 hours of it is on the actual content, and then 2 hours of bonus stuff, like study habits, how to recognize dialectical problems, things like that. And so that just comes along with any subscription to the Mandarin Blueprint Method. So if you are currently a member of the Mandarin Blueprint Method, you go to your course library, which is there's a big old button in the corner that always allows you to go to the course library. You can go to pronunciation mastery at any time. Do not take pronunciation lightly. Luckily, Chinese has only 420 independent syllables, so it doesn't take too much to master Chinese pronunciation. You could do so with Mandarin Blueprint's pronunciation mastery. So thank you very much to all the people who submitted questions this week. As a reminder, you can always go to mandarinblueprint.com to check out the newest from the blog and from the podcast. And I would highly recommend that if you enjoy the course, well, you share it with other people so that they can enjoy it too, because that way you're doing something to help more people speak Mandarin and connect with the most important country of the century. So we'll see you next week.